depends on where you find that they look like the same.
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
But I have said that.
Welcome back to that segment where we bring you all the stories that made the front pages of the newspapers this morning. Select newspapers, if you like, and as is the tradition, we would begin with the Daily Trust. And the first story here, of course, is keeping touching base with the reality in the home front. Families cry out as food prices hit rooftop.
Are we sure it's not beyond the rooftop at this point?
I mean,
it's skyrocketing.
You know, bags of rice, maize, beans, sugar, gari on a weekly increase. Inflation eroding capital base, that's coming from traders. Experts seek suspension of tariffs and others. Kogi, Lagos buyers pay more as inflation hit 24.08%. That came out from the Nigeria Bureau of Statistics yesterday.
I mean, you understand Nigeria's business situation. You do a lot of reporting on this. Do you think the numbers capture, in terms of accuracy, how dire the situation is? Because it's beyond description at this point.
Absolutely. I think that is what this story wanted to achieve. If you recall the last time, with the last numbers in June, we queried how a 0.25% basis point increase did not reflect the reality that people were enduring. And I remember the Bureau of Statistics tweeting in response to that story to say the samples were taken before the last petroleum increase. And the samples are usually taken in the first 2 weeks of the month. That obviously whatever we were looking at as base effects were not captured, but clearly in the subsequent months. And so we saw a jump from 0.25% to about 1.2% in the July figures. But even at that, you also recall that the inflation basket is just a sampling of a few crops, you know, and what is taken is an average of the increase across platform. If you begin to drill to the food inflation part, the situation is as worse, you know, as it can get, to the level where traders are now telling you a 10 million naira capital is just nothing. And because by the time you dispose of the goods, when you return what you bought for, say, 9 million to sell for 10, it's now 12.
And I suppose it's going to be a lot more difficult to explain to average Nigerians why these things are happening, because it's a factor of a lot of variables.
I mean it's you would try to explain, but even in the advanced economies of the world, there are people in certain class of the economy who don't care what you're saying. If they go to the shops and prices of wheat or breads or whatever it is, or cereals change, then they have issues. However, you try to explain that away, it's your business. What they want to see is stability. So
globally, the economy is not doing particularly well. Even for your so-called first world economies or developed economies, whether it's China, the United States, and Britain, inflation is still an issue that they're grappling with. France, for instance, the recent riots and here and there. Here on the continent, South Africa, Kenya, the government just reversed its, taxation policy because the people are not happy about it. So it's a really global phenomenon.
Absolutely. And moving on to, you want to see the breakdown of all of what has transpired with those figures. You have a very lovely, very lovely infographics there by Ali Gaydam, which explains some of these increases. For maize, for instance, the 100 kilogram of maize, which sold for about 19,000 naira in February, today sells for 52,000 naira in August. That is more than double.
It depends on where.
Yeah, and
it depends on where also. In some states, it's as high as 70,000
naira. Yeah. And you can imagine what that is. A tuber of yam, which goes for about 700 in February, today sells for about 8,500. A loaf of bread in February was 600, today is 1,000 naira. I mean, there's no respite for the poor.
No,
and the president talked about allowing the poor.
That's why a lot of people would revert to all these fast food now, or even noodles that are pre-packaged noodles that are not necessarily nutritious, but they're a lot more cheaper than your tuber of yam or maize, for instance.
We hear stories of households in Kano who said they had to dispose their means of mobility because what was important is to get food on the table and get people to live one day at a time. We move on quickly to other stories. Niger, ECOWAS insists on sanctions as Northern elders demand withdrawal. You find the details of that on page 6. After Tinubu, CBN governors meeting, dollar crashes to 790 at the parallel market. Well, I think some kind of fear set into that cycle yesterday ahead of the weekly FX intervention by the Central Bank of Nigeria coming from that meeting with the president. They've promised that people will have their fingers burnt. In this case, I think we're happy about those fingers burnt because that's the only way we can breathe.
But there's also no, I mean, what are the chances that this will hold, for instance?
Well, it will happen, but nobody can tell what the size of that intervention will be. Would it leave us awash? The other uncertainty is how sustainable it is. You can pump in today, and when else are we going to see further pumps? It will take more than a single rainfall to really wet the ground in the case of Nigeria, if you're talking about a backlog of about $8 billion. Moving on to other stories, terrorists claim responsibility for helicopter crash. NAF investigation. Well, the army headquarters are telling us a different thing, and we're seeing this one. And to other stories, President rules out plan to restore petrol subsidy and price hike. These are the much we will take from the front page of the Daily Trust.
Let's turn our attention now to the front page of the News Direct. For today, DMO records 312 billion naira subscription in August. Bond auction amid financial market uncertainties. And the big story on the front page of the News Direct talks about inflation maintaining an upward slope. Hits 24.08% in July. Is it my English or is it a slope? Suggests it's coming down, but this one is obviously going up. But yeah, okay. That's that, and more on that particular story as the breakdown goes. Food inflation up by 26.98% year-on-year in July 2023. How flooding, high cost of transportation, high food prices. According to explanations by analysts, tackling inflation requires urgent government intervention, according to CCPE. And there's a lot more from that. You have a picture of the governor of Lagos State flanked by representatives of the Nigerian military in Lagos. I believe the military had a conversation, so to say, with LASMA officials about this ongoing fracas between some of their personnel. And that's where that particular story leads to. There's a lot more on the pages of the News Direct.
All right, moving on to the Daily Independent. We have the major stories there. No plan to raise fuel price, reverse deregulation. Says PMS consumption has dropped to 46 million litres per day, an alleged gross mismanagement in the Central Bank of Nigeria. And to other stories, aviation security commences indefinite strike over poor wages. FG applies to withdraw firearms case and suspend firearm case against suspended Central Bank governor. Tinubu loud Central African countries for backing ECOWAS against Niger junta. And PDP condemn invasion killing in Bayelsa Opu Nembe. To other story, West African army chiefs to meet about possible Niger intervention. And panel indict Okorocha for forceful acquisition of Ivan Ikoku land. Those are the major stories on the front page of the Daily Independent.
Okay, let's look now at the front page. Take a look now at the front page of the Sun newspaper, the Daily Sun newspaper. More trouble for MFLA. The writer says federal government files 20 fresh charges against suspended CBN governor. They're trying to hit him with everything they can, see what will stick. They were drawing that firearms charge, and just smacks of prosecution at this point. Many people have been saying about this, and you look at the way the prosecution is going about it, and you would be forced to agree that this is more likely a persecution instead of a prosecution. But it remains to be seen what the facts of the matter is or are at this point. 6 to withdraw illegal possession of firearms charge, and defense opposes that withdrawal. The big story is talking about the big story, obviously. Fuel price taxes won't go up according to the federal government. How do you do that in a regularized industry. More on that on page 25. Alvan Ikoku, panel indicts Okorocha for forceful acquisition of land. Ararome, Uche Umosu, Anwuka to lose houses. Terrorism, Katsina tops list of IDPs in northwest Nigeria according to the United Nations, and government cries for help. Coup, lift sanctions on Niger, northern elders tell Tinubu ECOWAS. And Nigerians knock federal government over clampdown on all eyes on the judiciary billboards. Government's actions threat to society, says Atiku. We won't be cowed. Intimidated, according to the sponsors of that billboard. International Igbo Confer begins tomorrow in UNN. Is that the University of Nigeria, Nsukka? I think so. Ohaneze, IWA, others back event. And finally, on a disturbing development, just school shooting, newly married couple identified as victims.
Very unfortunate. We move on now to the Guardian newspaper. And it is staying with the whole story around inflation. FG in deregulation dilemma. There's 24% inflation worsen poverty. And if you look at the chart there, it's showing you two parallels of the actual inflation figures and food inflation, which is a major driver of inflation narrative. The food inflation yesterday sits atop 26.98%, practically 0.2% short of 27%, whereas the actual inflation touched 24%. That makes our situation even more pathetic. And moving on to other stories, Nigeria may wait longer for Tinubu's cabinet despite hasty screening. You would think that by now we would have gotten the portfolios for those who had been screened. I
think they said perhaps next week. That's what I've been hearing.
Yeah. Manufacturing firms' profitability down by 351% in half year amidst soaring operating expense. To other stories, pedestrians flee as miscreants take over footbridges in Lagos. Fresh concerns over costs and relevance of the NYSC scheme in lean time. This question has been popping up for quite a while now. And FG to withdraw firearm case against Mefele. We've taken that from other papers. We will maintain petrol price without subsidy reversals, says Tinubu. That's it on our major stories on the front page. Pages this morning. We now have joining us in the studio, former director of the Voice of Nigeria, Mr. Ben Shama. It's a pleasure to have you join us in the studio this morning.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Good to see you. You're not your cheerful self this morning. Something
amiss?
Yeah. Honestly, something great happened to my son. So let's leave it this way.
Okay.
I'll only tell you behind.
Okay. Not for public consumption.
Exactly.
Okay.
But my smiling is for the public. Please see my teeth. See my teeth. I'm happy.
Right.
So I praise God. Yes.
It's the inflation story across all platforms this morning. We've seen the new numbers. It has touched 24%. Even though people say that the actual suffering on the ground may be beyond what the inflation numbers are capturing. The Daily Trust lead story today talks about food prices hitting rooftops. Abdul was talking about something beyond the rooftop. What do you make of our current circumstance?
This enough. Daily Trust major headline, front page, tells you why we shouldn't even bother about war in Niger. Look, I'm a pensioner. I don't know when I'll be paid. You know the log I have? A foreign news agency, hired me. How many people are as lucky that way? But I tell you, if you see hunger, you know hunger. How many people are calling, assist with fertilizer? How many people are calling, I don't have a cup of grain left in the house? You know, and how long will that continue? So it is, and the farming, the wet season will soon end up. We are still talking of a government without a cabinet. we need to go into serious farming now. Just 2 weeks ago, I said, see, if we can go into serious beans farming, come on, what is wrong with us? Let's see who we can meet and resolve this farmer hurdle. If we really were talking of farmers and hurdles, how do we resolve this? If you don't have food on ground, these are the very reasons why some people destroy democracy in some of these countries.
Are you surprised that the inflation, that food inflation, for instance, is still on a rise, despite the federal government's pronouncement of the release of, tens of metric tons of grains to cushion the effect of subsidy removal? Are you surprised? Because I suppose if there's a lot of these commodities in the market right now, rice and maize, the most popular staples, the most affordable ones to Nigerians, the prices wouldn't be going up.
Well, I do know that in my village or in my community, if you go to Mancho, Bondon and all that stuff, the grains they have are the ones they farmed, harvested and kept.
No intervention.
Nobody has told me this an intervention from them. Rather, people go there, go on a Friday to Manchok and see how many trailers are there or lorries are there. What are they doing? Buying these grains. And the people are always a kind of, they say, oh, they are so high. And you now look at some of them going to sell these things. When you sell, what will you buy? The yam that is just being harvested, they're just buying and taking them away, bringing them to cities. So what do the villagers, rural communities, what do they get in return? Virtually nothing. Nothing as in nothing. They do the farming under very serious security or insecurity threats. And by the time you get this, it's from that farm they have to pay school fees. That farm they clothe. That farm they buy palm oil. That farm, I mean, they live. And you want to pay light, you want to pay, inflation is just it. Go and see how many families are living in penury because of what we, I mean, I think the president needs a cabinet to assist him urgently. Because if this hunger continues, I think it can lead to
are you surprised,
revolution.
Are you surprised that we may likely not see the inauguration of the new cabinet this week? Because that's what some of the papers are reporting, that we might have to wait a little longer.
Well, I hope somebody is not advising Tinubu behind the scene against the wishes of his teeming voters. He should just say no and do the needful. Because for how long will you wait? Since May 29th, up to now, I mean, you just hurriedly presented some names to the National Assembly, who indeed thought they are also very loyal to the nation. Let us cancel our vacation and give the president his list of ministers. I mean, how has that moved us forward? Just to a kind of satisfy constitutional requirements. It's just not it. In as much as these things do not sink down into the kitchen finally to the table to the mouth, then there's still a problem. No matter how beautiful plans are articulated, and you now begin to talk of a government of the future, we are going to give you fertilizer, we are going to give you protection from bandits, we are going, that is government of the future. Please tell us what you have done. Let us, I invented an expression. Instead of earmark that we are hearing, we should eyemark. Let me see. Because many Nigerians have chosen to be doubting Thomas, who indeed, some people said biblically, he was a fact checker. He would want to check, Jesus, were you the one who was crucified? Yeah, let me see, where the nails? Let's see this, to verify. So when the government says, we are going to do, no, let us see what is on ground.
So enough of the lip service then.
Exactly.
Moving away from the inflation story, it's another story around what's going on in Niger State. Public knowledge, a good size of that state has been under the control of terrorists. We thought the activities had gone down to the recent attack where we sustained serious casualty on the part of our troops. And now an helicopter crash, the DHQ described as a crash that happened while rescue mission was on. The terrorists are not telling us it was actually brought down by them. Who do we believe in this instance?
Well, I don't know who to believe, but I don't know the altitude, the height in which this helicopter was flying, that an AK-47 bullet will bring it down. Because if you look at the wing of the helicopter and a bullet from an AK-47, look, the wing is capable of tilting that bullet to some areas. We needed a heavier weapon to do that. But I can see that Daily Trust is saying they've done a facts check on that. They've done a kind of a deep fact checking to see that, look, is this borrowed from somewhere and pasted based on what the terrorists are saying? And they say it's like they can't see that something similar like this happens somewhere. And so, in other words, Daily Trust is saying it could be true.
Yeah,
I've not done a fact checking.
I mean, if
but
you read,
just a moment, sir. Since the Air Force is saying it was a crash, in other words, either a crash can be either technical from the helicopter itself. You could have environmental problems if the man cannot see very well. You know, the clouds are around. Helicopter at the point don't go too far, and so then there's also the error of the pilot. So these are always
I think the president's statement on that, which was put out on X, that was formerly known as Twitter. This particular paragraph where he says these officers and men were answering the call of duty while on an evacuation mission in their dedicated service to our beloved country, paying the ultimate price. I mean, it's a vague term that is usually used to describe someone who died in action. When you pay the ultimate price, it doesn't suggest that it was an incident. It doesn't suggest that there were some technical issues. And I think the president is not necessarily saying that the craft was downed, but all indications are, because if you've seen the videos on YouTube, clearly, as you did say, it's not a deep fake. So it does suggest that there is some validity that the terrorists are operating in that area, which are well known, by the way.
Yes, the terrorists are operating there. But Abdullah, there are two things there based on what you have read. There was an ambush. This we cannot rule out. It's established. Now, since there was an ambush and soldiers died, you see, in military circle, they don't say they were killed. They said you paid the supreme sacrifice. That's how they put it. You know. Now, in other words, these people were killed. That is sin number one. Sin number two, you now call helicopter. Come, Air Force, come for evacuation. So you can see sin number two. The third sin is when it came down, crashing. Now, was it out of a technical matter? Was it an environmental issue? Was it a pilot error? So these are different things that we'll have to verify. But truly, yes, there was an ambush. And I tell you, we sympathize with fellow Nigerians. They were there a kind of to protect us so that we can even be in this studio in the first place. But if terrorists would do all of this, we expect that the Tinubu government would have. I checked that list. I can't see someone with very big military background that will begin to say, these are the signals, this man is likely to be the Minister of Defense. Under a situation like this, I think there has to be a rethinking of that position. I've checked, I could be wrong, but I am worried that the list we have, I can't see people who indeed can kind of they
you don't see a square peg in a square hole.
All right. Some people would argue that we have the service chiefs, and
that may be enough.
Basically,
that may be enough.
Yeah,
service chiefs don't attend Federal Executive Council meeting, and when civilians would take decisions on sentiments over there, is the military officer among them who will say, look, ladies and gentlemen, from Liberia, this was what happened. In Afghanistan, this was what happened. In our own case, now let's put the tables. Bear with me. Let me take this time to explain to you. This. I mean, but when you get, I'm not deriding any politician, but you bring somebody who probably read education, became a principal, and he will not be on ground when it comes to issues of security.
I agree with you. People will continue to put the arguments that there had been a precedent. We recall that Kwankwaso was Minister of Defense at some point. But let's move on. Still staying with the military, the ECOWAS Chief of Defense are meeting, and there's a call from the Northern Elders Forum saying we should back down on all of the sanctions that have been implemented. What are your takes on this?
Yeah, I think that if you look at the conditions ECOWAS has given the military junta, reinstate this man, quit the scene. Else, one, sanctions, a blockade, that is going on. Nigeria will bring its own. We cut off light. Nigeria is doing that. But when you look at the ripple effects, look at the contiguous states, right from Borno, Yobe, enter Kano, enter Katsina, go Sokoto. You just see that Nigerians are on the other side of the divide. Nigerians are in here. And by the time you look at the boundary markets, the daily livelihood being earned there, again, we'll be back to daily times food prices. Look at how many trailers have been trapped trying to come out of Niger Republic to even take cows for export, sheep for export, grains for export. They can't do it. Look at those that have been imported to now go to Niger. They are on the side of Nigeria. They are on the side of Niger. And therefore, the perishable items. What about the cows that have been standing in trailers for how long? One by one, they die. So I think that they have to soft pedal. And I think that the military, if you look at when the Izalatu leader, Abdullahi Balalau, he led a team, met Abdurrahman Tiani, the military strongman in Niger. I said, look, why don't we resolve everything around the table? The US is saying no to war, and Nigerians are saying, majority of Nigerians are saying no to war. And for the military, they cannot talk and say, look, yes to war. They all have to wait for what ECOWAS will do. And whatever ECOWAS will do, every nation's parliament will have to agree. Yes, Nigerian parliament will say, Tinubu, yes, you can mobilize and send. If it does anything contrary, of course, it's an impeachable offense. Then, if you look at ECOWAS parliament, parliamentarians from Nigeria, Ghana, Togo, just name all of them. They all are saying no. They've got, and there are some Nigerians who have taken ECOWAS to ECOWAS parliament, saying that ECOWAS is planning to invade a foreign nation.
It's safe to say that even within ECOWAS itself, the parliament is against the military intervention. The African Union is also not in support of a military intervention. It would rather prefer dialogue. We understand the economic cost of the blockade, for instance, the sanctions on the life of Nigerians, but also on this side of the border, how businesses are being shut. We've had several reports of people losing their means of livelihood and so on and so forth. I had the privilege of talking to a representative of the people there, the National Assembly. He said, listen, the losses are in billions of naira because most people have had nothing to do over the past couple of weeks as a result of the impasse in Niger. This is all collateral damage, isn't it? And how tied the president, for instance, cannot unilaterally lift some of these sanctions because he doubles as the chairman of ECOWAS. How does he do that? How does he navigate Nigerian interests vis-a-vis ECOWAS interests? Because there is an ECOWAS agenda as much as there is a Nigerian agenda.
Yeah, you see, the survival of the Nigerian that is, in fact, so sick, that man that is the one that you can say is the person who is the most sick person in this country needs to survive. Not to talk of the people in there. All of us will have to survive. Then as a corporate entity, our territorial integrity will have to be intact. And now, how do we do all of this? And I tell you, no matter the war you fight, you still go back to the negotiation table. Look at the British government, look at the Irish Republic. They fought how long? They went back to the table. Look at Sudan and South Sudan. They fought for how long? They still went back to the table. Look at even internal rumbles and fights in South Africa. I mean, after all the fights, they went back. They realized the bullet cannot solve the matter. The ballot was better. So I think that it's still time that we get people who indeed, we call them stakeholders. When President Buhari was leaving this scene, this country, he said, if Nigerians don't like him, he will move to Niger. This is a time that we call on Buhari, who loves Niger so well, and is sure Nigerians love him. He moves into, with Abdusalami, I can see Lao, you can see Sultan of Sokoto, who indeed are the stakeholders. Well, let's look for these in-laws. Let's move there for a handshake, and I think we'll resolve this matter rather than using the bullet. If you said you've closed the airspace, are you going to send in missiles here? Who are you targeting? Are you going with accuracy? Are you going with precision? Are you definitely sure that you're going to hit whoever you want? And when you land there, I mean, you still have to have some ground troops. Look at the whole landmass. And you have to have a force that will, I mean, will be so diversified. Those who will be carrying attacks. Really, I mean, it looks such a serious matter.
If Mr. Ben can speak this much about military strategy, then maybe the president is justified by having a civilian.
Right, exactly, because he does appear to have some expertise on tactics and things like that.
I think that Voice of Nigeria, since 1990, they made me a defense correspondent, and so I've been with them sometimes.
Assimilation.
Niger, Delta, Sierra Leone, Liberia, we were visiting those.
I wish we had more time to discuss military strategy with you, but time is no longer our friend. This is the much that we can bring to you today on From Our Tables. I want to thank you very much for always finding time to be here.
My pleasure.
Whatever that story you will tell us after the show, I hope is one that would leave a smile on the face of all of us.
Exactly.
All right, and to viewers, thank you also for being, for accompanying us on this journey. The last 2 hours have been one of enormous information. We hope we have brought you sufficient information to make your day brighter. We wish you the best of the day. I am Sunday Michael Ogu.
And I'm Abdullah Ahmed. Thank you very much for watching the program. Do join us again tomorrow live at 8 a.m. Good morning, and thank you for watching.